Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello, everyone. Tracy here. Welcome back to another episode. I am so thankful to have you joining me for another fantastic conversation. But before we dive right in, a quick word from this week's sponsor.
Soil health is under pressure, but real solutions start below the surface. Black Earth offers a full suite of humic solutions, from high-purity granules to powder, liquid, and soluble formulations, all powered by pure Humulite. Formulated for performance, backed by consistency, trusted by growers worldwide from one of the world's rarest reserves. Grow stronger with the power of Black Earth Humulite. Learn more from Mind to Market at blackearth.com.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today, I have an amazing guest. I have Nick Shady. How are you?
Good, thanks, Tracy. How are you?
Good. Welcome to the show. I'm
Thank
so
you.
happy to
Thank
have
you.
I feel as I was getting ready to open up Zoom and get ready for a conversation, I'm like, I feel like I'm talking to my long-lost friend from across the ocean. So, Nick, we are going to have a great conversation. I almost envision it two parts. One, we're going to talk about your fantastic book and why you wrote it, the information in there, and I'll share a little bit in a second. And then part two, we'll get into some of the real nitty-gritty challenges that you see with transition planning. So are you ready for this, Nick?
Yeah, let's go, Tracy.
Good. Okay. So, Nick, you are the author of this fantastic book, and that is how we met. I am on a hot mission to help Canadian, North American farm families from around the world with transition planning, right? It's tough, it's emotional, and we need to do this to pass the farms on. I went onto Amazon, bought every book I could find about transition planning. I absolutely love your book, Who Gets the Farm? A Practical Guide to Farm Succession Planning. So I had read it, I reached out, we've been chit-chatting, and I'm so excited and thankful to have you on the show. So before we get into our conversation, do you want to tell our audience a little bit about who you are and what you do? And then we'll dive right in.
Thanks, Tracy. The book was written in 2015, so it's 10 years old. So maybe we should get there. The next version too should be Who Got the Farm, which is probably what the listeners probably be more interested in, about what it looks like in the timeline 10 years later. So I was born in 1971. I was educated until 1988. Left school, had a year in the local bank branch back in the days when banks had branches in small country towns. Spent 12 months there, and then I came back onto the family business, which was predominantly sheep at Skipton in southwest Victoria, which is on the east coast of Australia. So Australian demographic for your listeners. Mainly all the farming is on the east coast and on the west coast, and we basically follow the coast because inside Australia's a very big paddock, but inside it there's not a lot of population and not a lot of rainfall, and hence not a lot of agriculture.
Okay.
So I'm a third generation farmer, and we ran it as a family business from basically my brother came home in 1983, so he's a bit older than me. And basically, if he hadn't have come home and run the business, mum and dad wouldn't be there when I left school, and they wouldn't have been there. Dad still lives on the same property he was brought up on in the 40s. So he's moved from an old house to a new house. He's moved 80 metres his whole life. So a metre a year. He's 80. He'll be 84 in November. So yeah. So and I'm a business person. I'm always been involved in figures and whatever. So to me, farming is a business. So it's not a romantic thing about this is where I grew up and this is where I'm going to die for me. So I moved into the local city, which is probably about 65 kilometres from where my work was mainly. I bought a house here probably nearly 20 years ago, and then I got married in 2010, and then wrote the book with my then wife Aisha Hilton, who had a background in professional writing, and we decided that what's an interesting topic, and I was pretty big into mental health, farmer mental health at the time, and the discussion was what's probably one of the biggest farmer mental health issues at that time in the early 2000s. That was probably farm succession planning. And probably, well, you get there and ask me, what's the biggest farmer mental health at the moment in the 2025? It's probably a greater issue is farm succession planning because of what the asset prices have done, the land prices have done in the last 10 years, which makes that decision of farm succession so much harder, so much more difficult. There's a lot more stakeholders when it comes to a massive amount of money when it comes time for distribution, if it has to be done. So in a nutshell, I've got a 13-year-old son. I sold the farms that I had. We all worked together until 2008 as a family, and then we split the farm up. I had my own little bit, pretty highly geared in debt, and I worked by myself and had a couple of really bad wet years. 2010 was probably the worst year I've ever been farming. We had like 50 inches of rain. We were predominantly winter cereal and oilseeds grower, and it was just wet, cold all year. It didn't matter if you planted spring crops. Most of the crops were sort of below cost of production that year.
Wow.
So that sort of led me to what am I going to do? Like, I didn't like living on the farm at that stage because it was either too wet or too dry. And then, so the book was written as a how-to guide. It was basically to get a conversation started. And I think that's what all the books are, is that starting that conversation if you haven't started that conversation. And that's where we see a lot of people, the conversation doesn't start.
Yeah.
And there's people sitting there saying, I wish we did this 30 years ago or 40 years ago, because they're still faced with the same issues now.
Yeah. Excellent. So that touched on why you wrote it. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. This book is comprehensive. When I started this show, Nick, and I say it a little bit here and there on the show, I didn't in the beginning. I said, I'm bringing a show to Canadian farmers to bring them the people and ideas that'll help their farming operation. Left it at that. The main reason I started this show was succession planning. I had seen it gone bad around me, and I'm like, no, okay, previous generations, let's give them a pass. They didn't have the information that we do. But if the next generation makes the same mistakes, shame on us. So when I started this show 8 years ago, I went onto Amazon, looked for a bunch of books, couldn't find much at that point. I didn't find yours. But now I'm so happy that there are comprehensive books like this. It was there when I was ready. There's some more books, a lot of information. I find by far yours would be, I would say, like a step-by-step guide. It's pretty comprehensive. Do you want to talk about what can be found in the book? Do you remember what you all put in there? That was a while ago. I don't read it every day.
It was a while ago, but it has dated reasonably well, as in the information side of it. And it was written as an Australian book by Australian farmers who who at that stage, we had done the succession plan in 1995. Basically, we had some idea what it was then, but a succession plan is really only a snapshot at the moment in time. So when I said jokingly, maybe the next version is who got the farm, that is the what happened in the 10 years after that. You get there and say, well, Nick, you don't have a succession plan any longer. Your family succession, it's not no longer relevant because of certain issues. So the book itself, it wasn't written to make money. So no one writes a book to make money. I can guarantee you that. So all the people that I know have written books. It's not a money making organisation. It's basically a charity where you're giving your information out. And the reason we did it in a book rather than an audio guide or whatever, it's something physical that the daughter-in-law can buy or the son can get given for Christmas by his wife and say, here's a book, you read this, and you go and give it to your mum, you go and give it to your dad, and it doesn't matter whether it gathers dust on the side of the bedside table for 12 months. Sometimes that's the only way the conversation can start. And that's the really sad part of intergenerational farming that I saw the need for the communication for a start. And how do you get that information to the relevant people? Because we're all time poor. But as you said, in every one of your episodes, you always say, there's plenty of time to fix the fence. There's plenty of time to do that. The things that farmers don't value is holidays and their family's future. We're looking at the right now, not looking ahead 5 years, 10 years. What legacy am I going to leave? You might get there and say, oh, I've built this farm up to 10,000 acres. That's a great legacy. But if it all has to be sold up, what sort of legacy are you leaving? And you always talk about legacy and what's my legacy? Well, I've sold my properties now, so my son has to realise at school he needs to go to school because there is no farm to fall back on. And I see that more and more where generations are saying, well, I might not go to university because I might inherit this farm, I might run this farm. But running a farm, it's running a business, it's running a small business, and it takes education to run a small business. And I was flicking through the book last night. Sorry, it's AM in Australia today. Sorry, when that I was flicking through the book and I was looking at next generation education, and it's a few guides about what we need to do to teach the next generation what involved in a business, which farming is a business. You might live on your farm and say, oh, this is where I live, this is my identity. And I think that's where we have those older generation of, this is my identity, I'm staying here until they take me out in the wicker basket coffin. That's what I want to do. And that's fair enough. They earn the right to stay there, but just don't leave a mess when you go. And I always talk to my cousins who are non-farming people, and I get there and say, and their parents are in their 80s, and I say, oh, what's their wishes? What are you doing? Are you going to have a long funeral, short funeral, no funeral? And they say, oh, hopefully when they die, I'll go and open up the filing cabinet and there'll be an envelope, a step-by-step envelope of what they want. So there is no discussion of that. And if you can't discuss what you want for your funeral, a lot of people can't discuss how they're going to want their business done. And don't wait until they're 80 before you try to work out what you're going to do, because you only get one go at life. And if you haven't got it sorted out by the time you're 30 in the farming business, that's when the alarms should sound, in my opinion.
Well, and you know the crazy thing, so many people don't want to start the conversation. They want to come back to the family farm or they're on it, but they don't want to make anybody mad. They don't start the conversation and they're operating on an assumption, right? And how dangerous is that for everybody?
But that's the way it is. That's the human. It's the human nature side of it. So, how do we get into that human nature side to say, I'm not going to put my young family through this, or I'm not going to make a choice of staying single and working all my 20s and 30s just to build this asset up that I might not actually get at the end of the day.
Yeah.
People need to value their time, and if you're a farming person, if you're a farming sibling, you need to value your time. I don't care whether you're a male or female, your time and your energy that you've spent on that farm business, that's valued. It should be valued. And it should be valued by the parents. And I have a discussion with a few of my friends who have got adult children, and I say, what's the plan? And they get there and say, well, we don't know. We don't know what we're going to do, you know? And
Yeah.
these people in their 50s, um, which, which is doesn't really, and this is in Australia in the last 20 years, we've seen a lot of corporates come in. So superannuation funds from overseas, because our currency is so low, it's actually quite cheap to come and buy our agricultural land.
Oh,
And so where we've got now is we've got the small family farms, which are basically finished, really, as in inflation and cost of living will absorb them up over time, like all businesses do. And then we've got family corporates, which are the family farms like ours is. My brother's probably, you get there and say his business size is big enough to be called a family corporate. And then we've got the superannuation funds. So that's where we are in Australia. Um, and if you're a family farm, to get to that family corporate situation, you need professional help. You need professional people, not only in the agronomy side of it. We're all good about the agronomy side of it and our livestock side of it, but when it comes to working out the nuts and bolts of where this business is going in the 5-10 year plan, that's where there's a massive failure. Um, so I don't know whether I've answered any of your questions,
yeah,
but
that's perfect. There's so much there. I always just kind of want to go on a riff and,
yeah,
and
yeah,
just take it away, but that's
yeah.
fantastic. One of the things I want to point out here, it is, I was going to read some of the chapters, but I'll put a link in the show notes. If you're watching, listening, it's also, I've included it in my resource. I have an ebook that recommends resources for succession transition planning, but I'll put a link, have a look. You can buy it on Amazon. The neat thing that I like about it, in addition to the fact that it's comprehensive, it talks about all of it, right? Like it's a guidebook, I would call it. I like that you put case studies in there. Here's one that I just opened to. Husband dies and wife left penniless. Dad dies, mom's still alive, son farming. So you go over, there's 15 case studies. That's neat as well.
Tracy, it's very hard to have real life situations and bring them into a case study where no one gets offended. And you can get there, and since we've written the book, I have friends get there and they will say, Nick, I should be one of your chapters,
Mm,
because they've been through the disaster of what it does to families. And as I said, since the increase in the cost of land, so land, but I'll give you, everyone loves numbers. So in the 90s, when we started farming, we could buy agricultural land, good agricultural land, for 500 to say $700 an acre, which was expensive at the time. Everything was expensive back there in the olden days. We all get there and say, in the 90s, everything was expensive, the interest rates were 8%. Like, how did we actually manage,
Yeah.
but what we did, we were able to buy, and this is something that I don't know whether it was an Australian thing at that time, was that you could buy a bit of land, pay it off, and then go and buy the next bit. And that's what we did that was our family, the way we did things better. We talk about business, about competitive advantage. That was our competitive advantage, is that we ran a lean show. We didn't get paid a wage. My brother and I worked with mum and dad. We lived with mum and dad until we were nearly 30, all like in the same house. Our competitive advantage was we didn't spend a lot of money on ourselves. We invested into the farm business, and we changed from being basically, we rode on the sheep's back, like all the Australian, you hear the Australian things, Australia was built on the sheep's back. We were basically sheep wool growers, and then we converted our business and we went 100% crop.
Okay.
And the amount of people that told us we were going to go broke, you couldn't even write it on. You get there and say, mate, this is crazy. No one's done this. You're going to go broke. You'll be back running foot righty old merino sheep in no time. So that was our competitive advantage, that we were probably early adopters of agriculture, technology, stuff like that. And that's what you need to do as not only a business person. I talk to my son about that. What's your competitive advantage when you go to school? Like, oh, well, I've grown up around a lot of older people, so I can talk to older people and understand that sort of stuff. So our competitive advantage was that. So to now the land back when we get, so let's fast forward to 2005-6, land had moved basically to $2,000 an acre. So that's a pretty big increase.
Yeah.
And then I sold mine basically for around about that in probably, it'd be 7-8 years ago. Oh no, probably not even that long. But that and then it doubled again to say $4,000. And then what happened? We saw around COVID times, we would see agricultural land hitting that $10,000 an acre. And this is not irrigated land. This is just dry land, winter cropping land, places that annual rainfall of, still talking inches, because I was growing up in inches. We have a metric system, but we have a rainfall in inches. So we're talking a 26-inch annual rainfall. And the farming in our area is basically, we need a autumn break. We need which in autumn in our area is sort of March onwards. Our summer is in December, January, February, being Southern Hemisphere. So we would plant the crops from basically 15th of April onwards. You want them all sown by June, and then you hope that you're going to have enough rain in winter to grow the crop through to harvest it in November, December, January.
Okay.
Or you end up with too much rain in June, July, August, and the crops die, and then you resow them in springtime. So that's the way that the cropping situation works here in Australia, basically, because we don't have a lot of irrigation. So and my competitive advantage was I wanted to get this farm succession done, because when my brother and I bought land, we bought it in our own names. It wasn't bought in mum and dad's name. And at that time, everyone would get there and say, well, if you get divorced or if you get a woman comes along, she's going to take it all, But what do you do? And there are still people who don't have anything in their own name. And the ability, once we had the family split, we had enough, some land that I was able to sell it to my brother. He was able to sell blocks that were a long way away. He was driving to like 60 kilometres between blocks, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And he was able to basically bring it all back into we have never bought a farm next door to our original land. Never bought a farm
Oh,
the land has never come up. So we've had to buy external. So and what I paid for my first farm in 1995 was 520 acres. You can't even buy a block in our local city. Like you can't even buy a 400 square meter block in our local city now for that price. And
wow.
that's where I see the next generation of, if you are not on the ball about where you're going, you will be, yeah, you need to get your financial affairs in order. And you as in not the 80-year-old dad, not the 60-year-old son of that farmer. It's the 25-year-old, 30-year-old child who's sitting there thinking, "Where's my future sit?" Everyone needs to get off their ass and do something. And the book is a conversation starter. It is, that's all it is. If you're depending on the book to get your accountant to sort out the way it should be left, if you're depending on the book to get there and people are going to read it and then they're all going to come to the table and say, right, how about we do it this way? You're joking yourself. The book is some information about how you break the ice, whether it's at Christmas time and you're all sitting around before you start yelling and arguing at each other. You say,
Uh-oh.
what are we doing? But we don't want to ask those hard questions because it's uncomfortable. You
Yeah.
know, it's uncomfortable to ask your mum and dad who are in their 80s, how are you leaving this property? How, are you leaving it to my siblings that haven't been there? What's the fair? Don't wait until they're 80 to say what's fair and reasonable of what am I going to get? And I sold my land, and I'm debt free. I'm one of these people that cannot handle debt at the moment. I'm I'll borrow money to buy machinery. I only stopped farming this February. I was once I sold the land, I was still share farming and contracting. So those 5 years were up, and I decided not to keep going. I've still got all my machinery sitting in my brother's sheds, who he's probably pissed off about, but that's the way it is. But it still gives me that opportunity to make an income out of agriculture,
Yeah.
even though I don't own land. And the cost of owning land now is getting higher and higher, with governments wanting to try to increase costs because every government's running a deficit. What's the best way to get money? We go to the milking cow, which is the people that own assets.
Yeah.
So flicking back, don't wait until your mum and dad or your grandparents who might be still on the farm, and as I said, it's still their they're allowed, they built that business.
Yeah.
Don't get there and say, I'm entitled to that business. You're entitled to work out how you're going to be able to get that succession working. And yeah, and that's, don't depend on the book to say, well, I don't think we need a lawyer, because I think the book gives us a good enough guide about what we do.
Right.
And it was interesting. I went and did my wills probably 18 months ago, and I got there and said to my accountant, send this stuff to the lawyer. I'll just wander in. It's pretty easy. I've got no debt. We'll just divide it up between my ex, my son, my current partner, mum and dad, my sisters, whatever I want to do. Got there, and it was complicated. Even though I had no debt, it was complicated because my company structures, like the accountant's been working on it for how many years. I've got superannuation everywhere. Uh,
Yeah.
it's detailed because this business owes this business money. It's
Yeah.
what the and it's complex. Don't think that you're going to be able to sort it out in 3 weeks. And when I say in the book, and one of the things that people don't say, and they get offended sometimes when I say, "What's your harvest strategy?" If you're a grain grower, you harvest every year. Hopefully, if you have a good season.
Yeah.
Or what's your harvest strategy? And I say, when are you getting out? I ask these people in my age, in their early 50s or 60s, when are you going? You know, and there was a when we were farming together, we did a little bit of ag contracting for neighbours, and there was a neighbour, and I distinctly remember I said, oh, what's the go, Bill, or what are you going to do? And he says, I'm going to sell out and be gone by the time I'm 60, because if you're still here when you're 60, you're not going. So, which means, and that's pretty much spot on. If you're still farming it when you're 60 on the family farm, you're not going. You're not retiring and moving to town, taking up bowls, taking up golf.
Yeah.
You're staying here forever. This is your identity, you know. And we talk about identities very easily. Like, what's your identity? Like my identity is I volunteer. I've got a young like a son in high school. I help people out. I have chosen the path of what I've done to selling my farming assets so I can live the way I want to live. You know, my identity is I'm free. Like I'm one of the 0.05% of farming people that are happy every morning. You know, happy. I don't. If it rains 20 mils overnight, I don't have to worry. I go, oh, geez,
Yeah.
it's rained. You know, I don't have to worry about the crops are dead, whether they need 150 kilos of urea at $800 a ton to be spread on the crops when the agronomist says the crops are behind. You know, uh, it's what you want to do in your life, and don't wait. If you're a farming family, don't wait until you might be too old to do anything, but don't wait and then realise that you've worked all your life for nothing. And that's we need to value what our labour is worth, and that's something that people that go to an office job, they value what they are worth. So, and everyone gets there and says, "Oh, the book's not very comprehensive." But how can you fit every? It's like shoes. You cannot get there and say, "Here, have a lend of my shoes to your friend," because they wear them differently. It's all different. So yeah.
There is some really, sorry to jump in there. There's some really good information. I think it's quite comprehensive, and the case studies are valuable too. But I like, and we're going to get into this in part two, and I call it the nitty gritty raw things to be concerned about. We'll go there right away. But I like opening these conversations up because when you're young, right, when you're 20 and you're 30, you're just kind of learning about the world. You don't want to disrespect your parents. You don't want to make anybody mad. So you go along to get along. But the thing you realize as you get older, all of a sudden you're 40, you're 50, and you look up and you go, whoa, oh my goodness. Or 60, if I didn't say 60. And then you go, wait a minute. Dad and mom have been ignoring this conversation for 10, 15, 20 years. Nothing's going to happen. We don't want that, right? And I like the wording that you're bringing. This gives you knowledge, the young generation, right? This gives you knowledge. You can start planning, operate your life like it's your life, and then start the conversation, right? You have a right to ask so you know what your future holds, right? That's the way I look at it. Don't just wait for somebody else to decide your future, but I'm a little bit different. And I love how you just stress that this is not the be all end all. It's knowledge to give you information so that you can ask questions and start planning your life, right?
Mm. And my wife at the time, Aisha, who was a professional rider, she could see it from the daughter-in-law's point of view, because she was a part of. So, as soon as you get, even after the first couple of days, she's a part of that business,
Yeah.
that family business. If you're running a family business, because all of a sudden it's, oh, Nick can't come to the Christmas concert because he's got to be on the harvest, or he's got to cart grain. You know, it's it is the women that I see, and that's why she got there and said, "Well, it's the daughter-in-laws that are the ones who suffer the most, because they suffer most of the time in silence. Because if you get there and I did a lot of talking at the time, I'd be invited to speak at certain events, and at the farming events, I like looking at people and seeing what their reactions. So you can get there and the blokes will be sitting there, they'll be yawning and say, "Oh yeah, we've been talking about farming succession for 15 years." You go out the back to take your cup of coffee back out to the back into the kitchen, and then the women are sitting there and they're fuming. They're saying, "My husband hasn't done this. I've been talking to him for years about it. Our kid," he said, "before we started having children, we were going to talk about farm succession. And now that they're going to high school, we're no further down that track." And that was the frustration you could see in people's faces of the inability of people to organise their business. It's a business. Farming is a business.
Yeah.
If you want your business to succeed, you need to understand how it works, have a plan, have a 1-year plan, 5-year plan. How about the 1-year plan is we get our wills sorted out, and the succession story itself, it is only good for 5 to 10 years maybe, and then it needs to be updated. And everyone thinks, "Oh, a will, I'll just do a will and that'll fix up a succession plan." If you do your will when you're 50, say I did mine when I was 52, and I'm going to live till my average age of a male now is 83, there's 30 years where my will, I think, as a bloke, my will's fine. What are you talking about? Oh yeah, no, I haven't had any more children since then, but the executors may have passed away 20 years ago. So you will, and that's the challenging part when you ask people, "Do you have stuff in order?" You ask 9 farmers out of 10, "Have you got a succession plan?" The first word is, "Yes, of course I have." "What does it look like?" "I don't know. We did it back in 1984. It should be still pretty right at the moment." But then I say, "But you've got 7 grandchildren. What are they doing?" Or one of your children's passed. What do you? Oh, I don't know. And a lot of people you will see, and don't take this the wrong way, but a lot of people say, "It doesn't matter, Tracy. When I'm dead, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter me. It's just for the people to be left behind." And one of those case studies was that the husband did die in a farm accident. And if there's nothing there, there's no certainty about. And back then, probably, housing here in Australia now is ridiculous. It's nearly $1 million average per house. So it doesn't matter whether you live in a small area or a big city. All the governments want to increase population because that fixes everything. But we seem to be borrowing more money, and the countries seem to be getting worse and worse. Cost of living is terrible.
Yeah.
But back then you could have bought a house reasonably well. But if you need to sell 1,000 acres to buy $1 million house now, you need a lot of assets to retire on. And if you've only lived on the farm, you won't have a house. And if you pass away, say that I was farming and I fell out of the tractor, and then they had to sell the business. You can't sell if you've got a force to sell the business. Things are tough. You beggars can't be choosers, because the land now probably you wouldn't get. Maybe if you had to fire sale, you might get $4,000 or $5,000 an acre. Oh. So it's still great money, of course, but then you're leaving your family. They have to sell the land to educate the kids. There is no income coming in. We were always told when we were farming, you need life insurance. You need life insurance to cover yourself, to pay your debts down. And life insurance has got the premiums are that high. You can basically go and buy another farm and pay the interest on another farm, and then if you pass away, you sell it. So Yeah, the frustration still it's still happening, Tracy. It doesn't matter whether you write a book, whether you force it down their throat. There are people still hesitant to do it because they're going to live forever. We're
Right.
going to live forever. I don't need to worry about it. I'm going to live forever. And then when I'm gone, it doesn't matter. And that's the sad part. So people who are farming, they need to get up and get going and get something on the paper because you're probably going to need 2 or 3 succession plans if you start in your 20s about you want to one when you're want to move on. When am I going to retire? What's my retirement look like? How much money am I going to need to retire on? If I've got to sell the farm to retire, there's no point having my son come home and work with me for 15 years. I'm only buggering up his life.
Yep.
Let them enjoy what they want to do. And yeah,
Well,
that's
sorry, I wanted
that's
to.
the unknown. It's an unknown.
Yeah, and that's the thing where I'm just so passionate about, how do you word it? Just learn, take responsibility for your life, because if there isn't a clear transition plan and you're spending 10, 15, 20 years on a farm, and maybe that's great and you made a wage and nothing's lost, but you invested those years in the farm versus, let's say, the big conversation is always off-farm children. They go out, they get a career, they have a pension, and they've dedicated those 20 years to a career, right? Where they have a retirement. Now you dedicate those years hoping that you're going to take that family farm over and it has to get sold. Well, right? Now you're left on a hook. So I'm curious. You've done speaking. I'm sure you've chatted to people that have read your book. Have you got any feedback? I want to kind of wrap this front part up about the book with some feedback and parting words about the book and taking initiative. And then I want to move into what I'm calling part 2 of our conversation and really diving deep into some of those issues. And I call that the nitty-gritty. So, reader feedback and a call to action to that young generation that's sitting there, they're frustrated. What do I do?
The feedback's been good, but not great because people get there and say, "Oh yeah, I'll read that," and they'll get there and they'll read it, and then it'll be something that you put in your bookshelf. But there's people that have read it, said, "Thank you, it's helped us get the conversation started, and it's actually helped us get what we want."
Good.
But but those people were probably going to get there anyway. But
Right.
there'd be still a lot of people that I probably gave half the books away to people that I know, and they can take it on. Like, you can't force people to do things, and I think that the reader feedback was more from the daughters-in-law saying this book is very important, that I give it to my husband, and then who gives it to his mum and dad or gives it to his mum, because and it's we always say the founding fathers are the dad, the who's in charge. But a lot of the time, the mums will be the ones that are really in charge. They're the ones that make the decisions about who does what, how it all happens. And the thing is, you cannot start early enough. And the people that have been through it, it splits families up at times. Land may have to be sold, and you, life's hard enough without having a family you don't talk to, and that's one part of it. Let's go back to a family farm is a business for a start, but unfortunately, the family in the farm is a part of who you are. That's your identity. Like, I'll always be Bill and Elon's son. I'll be the brother of Chris. We work together. And people get there and say, "Oh, you've split the farm up. You must not. You must hate each other, do you?" And I said, "No, we probably talk daily. We could still farm together if we had to. Just our farming philosophies at that time were different about where we should head. He's a 24/7 farmer and he loves it. Whereas I like to have a weekend off, you know, like I need time off. I just can't keep working. And it's like everyone. So we need to identify, and I think the book does discuss that about how the farm roles are done. You know, what does it look like? Because there'll be someone who'll get there and say, I want to enjoy my life. I want to go to my sport on weekends if I've got children. What are that? And it's very easy to be farmers when you don't have children because you don't have that um, other people that you have to think about. You know,
Right.
if you're single, you don't have to worry about anyone. You know, but if you're married, you should be thinking about that person in the same way as you think about yourself. You can't be greedy and all that stuff there. But getting back to the book, it is people have got there and said, we like that. They understand that the case studies are based on true stories, but all the guilty names have been deleted for a reason. And we can't go into the details of it because people then identify themselves as it. And that's the worst part. So I read a few of the case studies. I got there and said, "Oh, geez, they're very vague about what I've done," but you can't get there and say it. But it's the people you meet in the supermarket years later that have been through the Supreme Court
Yeah.
time, spent millions of dollars on legal fees, and then the farm's probably going to have to be sold anyway. That's the sad story. That's the one, Tracy, where I get there and say, yeah, they're the people that I feel sorry for, um, because they're my friends. They're the people that I've grown up with, and they've worked their guts out for the family, often for no money. The wives have had to work, and then asset prices come up, and the rest of the family say, "Oh my God, there's a lot of money here to be had," you know, and greed is a 20th century thing, you know. Um, Greed's probably been around everywhere, but greed now is, I think, more and more a factor, you know, and the fair and equitable, and we're going to get into this later on. Fair
Yeah.
and equitable is very easy to do it in 1995.
Yeah.
Fair and equitable in 1995 was a lot easier to do than in 2025 because you've got a massive pool of assets now, value.
That's sorry to hop in there. That's one of the chapters you do touch on that here. So if you guys are generation two farm founders, anybody involved, grab this book, learn, it's your future, take control, and use this as a starting point to get some knowledge and start the conversation with the farm family, right? Nick, I think maybe do a call out. They can buy this on Amazon anywhere, I believe, in the world, right?
Yeah, I jumped on the VPN the other day. It's available Amazon Canada, Amazon. It's on a Kindle or Amazon as a softback. Uh, yeah, hopefully it gets us it gets you started, you know. And I did talk to Tracy. I was a bit shocked when I jumped on the Canada Amazon on the VPN, and it had a 1 star review, and I thought, gee, 1 star review, that's not very good. And the person was a bit concerned that it didn't address the taxation issues in Canada because they're a little bit different in Australia. And as I said, if you're using the book to work out your taxation side and your accounting side and your solicitors, you've got to, yeah. And look, fair enough. It was written in Australia for all family farms,
Yeah.
all family people, because it's not just an Australian thing. The lack of farm succession planning, it's an international thing, and you can probably get there and say business succession, regardless whether it's farming, whatever. You might be running a nursery or a sand and soil place. It is that farm succession. It is that business succession of how do you get the next generation to do it? When are you going to retire? If you need $3 million to retire on, you're not going to generate that income nowadays. So you may have to sell that business to retire, and that's what I mean about the harvesting of how does it look, and how many. Yeah, we'll talk later about viability, and yeah, that's a major issue.
Okay, then you know what? Let's leave that as a jumping off point. We're not going to worry about Karen, the 1-star Amazon review gal, because she was also looking. I've named her Karen. I can't remember the name. We won't name her because this is a fantastic book. She was also looking to learn about climate change. So we're just not going to worry. I think her comment was taxation and climate change. So I think she was like trying to learn about elephants, and she bought a book on giraffes. So we're not going to worry about her. The book is excellent. We'll put links in the show note. And right away, we're going to come back to part 2, where we're going to do some straight talk, real talk. And obviously, this is knowledge, information to start your journey. Then we're going to get into some straight talk about the biggest things that need to be on your mind, whether you're a farm founder, Generation 2, as issues and challenges and obstacles for succession planning. So tune in to part 2 right away.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.